Hey guys! Movie recapped here. Today we are talking about movie Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man is a 2002 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name. Directed by Sam Raimi from a screenplay by David Cope, it is the first installment in the Spider-Man trilogy, and stars Tobey Maguire as the titular character, alongside Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Cliff Robertson, and Rosemary Harris. The film tells the origin when outcast teen genius Peter Parker develops spider-like superhuman abilities after a genetically altered spider bites him and decides to use his newfound powers to fight crime as Spider-Man. Let's start.
Peter Benjamin Parker, Tobey Maguire, is a geeky and bashful however keen secondary school senior understudy at Midtown Secondary College of Science and Technology in Queens, New York City. His folks are dead and he lives with his uncle Benjamin Parker, Cliff Robertson, and Aunt Mabel Parker, Rosemary Harris. He has eyes for his nearby neighbor, Mary Jane Watson, Kirsten Dunst, who is likewise one of a handful of the schoolmates who is great to him, her sweetheart, a games player and the school menace, Eugene Strait Thompson, Joe Manganiello, and his pals menace and single out him. Peter's just companion is Harold Theopolis Harry Osborn, James Franco, who, however rich and attractive, is also an outsider. Harry, be that as it may, is fairly desirous of the warmth his dad, Professor Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, shows Peter. Norman, the organizer, proprietor and head of weapons worker for hire Oscorp, appreciates Peter's logical inclination and can scarcely cover his longing that Peter was his own child. Peter's science class goes on a field outing to a hereditary quality science research center at Columbia University. The lab chips away at insects and has even figured out how to make new types of super spider through hereditary DNA control and mix, while Peter is taking photos of Mary Jane for the school paper. One of these new hereditarily modified bugs escapes without anybody seeing, terrains on its hand and ravenously tears into him. Peter returns home inclination sick and quickly heads to sleep. At the hereditary level, the toxin infused by the insect nibble starts to work weird sorcery on Peter. In the interim, General Slocum, Stanley Anderson, visits Oscorp to see the after effects of their new Super Trooper equation at the point when one of Norman's top researchers, Professor Strom, Ron Perkins, cautions him the recipe is unsound. General Slocum takes steps to pull all of the tacticals financing from Oscorp. Sometime thereafter, Norman opens himself to the gas recipe. He acquires godlike strength and spryness yet is made crazy. He kills Strom and takes two other Oscorp innovations, a green troll-form shielded exoskeleton flight suit and bat-molded stream lightweight flyer. Peter gets up the following daytime feeling over and above anyone's expectations. He additionally learns his lean body currently swells with muscles and his vision is great. At school that day, he learns he can shoot networks out of spinnerets in his wrists. He exhibits his own new spryness by getting Mary Jane and her food plate when she slips at lunch and afterward beating an incensed Flash in a fist fight. That evening, he and Mary Jane nonchalantly beat a tease across the fence isolating their lawns, albeit Flash splits this up when he shows up with his new vehicle. Peter accepts he really wants a vehicle to intrigue Mary Jane, however knows neither he nor the destitute and resigned Ben and May would have the option to manage the cost of one. One night he sees a notice in the paper. A nearby expert wrestling association will pay $3,000 to any individual who can endure 3 minutes in the ring with their wrestling champion, Bonesaw McGraw, Randy Macho Man Savage. Peter plans a suit and heads out to the field, telling Ben and May he is going to the library. Ben and May are stressed over the progressions in Peter's character and Ben demands driving him to the library. He attempts to clarify his and May's interests. He urges Peter not to get into additional battles. He may have the ability to beat the Flash Thompsons of the world, however to whom much is given, much will be expected. The obligation to realize when and how best to utilize that power. Peter responds severely. He tells Ben he isn't Peter's dad and ought not behave as is he. Peter not just endures the wrestling match, he overcomes Bonesaw quickly. Be that as it may, the advertiser pays Peter just $100. Furious at being gypped, Peter stands to the side as a furnished burglar named Dennis Carradine. Michael Papagian takes all the money and holds up the advertiser, getting away through a lift. Notwithstanding, when he gets out to the road, he finds stunned that Dennis the crook lethally injured Ben with a weapon and took his vehicle. In pain, Peter pursues down Dennis and beats him. The burglar drops out of a window where his body is recuperated by the police. Peter is devastated that evening, realizing that assuming he had halted Dennis whenever he gotten the opportunity and not acted so egotistically, then Uncle Ben would in any case be alive. That very evening, a threatening figure wearing the taken Oscorp exoskeleton and riding the Stream lightweight flyer assaults a weapons test at Quest Aerospace, Oscorp's central rival. Their model is obliterated and General Slocum is killed. Peter is roused by Ben's caution to involve his recently found insect-like superpowers for everyone's best interests. He plans another red and blue skin-tight outfit total with spiderweb example and bug images and swings around New York, thwarting trivial burglaries and muggings as the Amazing Spider-Man, a name he gets from the commentator at the wrestling match. This doesn't charm him to Mr. Jonathan Jameson. J.K. Simmons, the testy and irritable supervisor, proprietor and distributor of the Daily Bugle, New York's driving news organization muckraking newspaper. In any case, when he learns Spider-Man sells papers, he puts out a call to picture takers for better photographs for his first page. Peter, Harry and Mary Jane move on from secondary school and move to Manhattan. Peter and Harry get a space together and go to classes at Empire State. Mary Jane functions as a server and battles to get acting tryouts. She and Harry additionally start seeing each other. Harry apologizes to Peter yet brings up Peter was excessively timid 100% of the time to take action himself. Peter battles to hold down a task after his researcher-instructor-manager, Professor Courtesy Conures fires him for continuously being late. Norman proposes to assist him with observing one yet regards Peter's craving to make his own specific manner on the planet. Peter sees Jameson's commercial for great photographs of Spider-Man and, webbing his camera in advantageous spots, gets fantastic photographs of his own brave activities. Despite the fact that Jameson doesn't compensate fairly, he consents to purchase a greater amount of Peter's photographs. Norman is additionally cheerful. Quest needs to rearrange after the calamity that killed Slocum. The Scorp has greater government contracts and the organization's stock is taking off. He is dejected to become familiar with the board of directors has picked the second to acknowledge a buyout offer from Quest. His craziness shows itself in a split character, the determined at this point confounded Norman, and the lethal, conspiring reprobate who will before long become known as the Green Goblin. As the Goblin, he assaults Oscorp's yearly Unity Day Road Fair procession and kills the board of directors. His assault additionally imperils Mary Jane. Spider-Man fends off the Goblin and salvages Mary Jane when she almost tumbles to her demise. Mary Jane winds up going gaga for Spider-Man, an inclination possibly supported when he saves her from certain attackers a couple of days after the fact during a blustery evening. This time, she expresses gratitude toward him with a profound kiss. She doesn't realize he is truly Peter. The Goblin concludes he and Spider-Man ought to be accomplices. He assaults the Bugle office to bait Spider-Man into a snare, utilizing take-out gas to repress him, and afterward gives Spider-Man a couple of days to thoroughly consider his proposal of association. He cautions Spider-Man the city will ultimately betray him, and that they should administer it together. A couple of days after the fact, on Thanksgiving, Goblin organizes a fire in a high-rise to find a solution from Spider-Man. Insect Man will not get together with Goblin, and the two battle. Insect Man gets a terrible cut on his arm. As Norman and Peter, the Goblin and Spider-Man are expected at the space for Thanksgiving supper. They each race back independently. At the point when Peter shows up to supper with new blood from the cut on his sleeve, Norman acknowledges Peter is Spider-Man and quickly leaves. On the exit plan, he affronts Mary Jane and she leaves, hurt that Harry didn't protect her. That evening, Goblin assaults Aunt May at home, sending her to the medical clinic. While visiting her, Mary Jane uncovers her crush on Spider-Man to Peter, yet they end up having a private second themselves. Harry sees this and knows his relationship with Mary Jane is finished. Troll chooses to strike at Spider-Man through Mary Jane. He hijacks her, then, at that point, undermines a streetcar brimming with youngsters along the Mid-Hudson Roosevelt Bridge. At the point when Spider-Man shows up, Goblin provides him with the decision of saving Mary Jane or the streetcar. Then, at that point, drops them both from the scaffold. Insect Man figures out how to save both, with the help from a passing flatboat and people on foot on the scaffold who pelt Goblin with garbage and postpone him from his endeavors to kill Spider-Man. Troll rather snatches Spider-Man and tosses him into a neglected structure. The two battle, and the Goblin overwhelms Spider-Man. In any event, tossing a pumpkin-molded troll explosive bomb straightforwardly at Spider-Man's face, intensely harming Spider-Man's veil and injuring him. As the Goblin keeps down Spider-Man and is going to kill him with double edges, he tragically threatens Mary Jane. Irritated at this, Spider-Man pounds Goblin into the ground, overwhelming him, yet stops when the Goblin exposes to uncover himself to be Norman. Peter is stunned that Norman is the Goblin. Norman then, at that point, attempts to motivation to Peter that every one of the activities that had happened were from the impact of the Goblin's persona upon him. As Norman discussions to Peter, requesting absolution, Goblin's lightweight flyer shows up behind Spider-Man, and the Goblin persona assumes control over Norman. Troll attempts to utilize a stream lightweight flyer to kill Spider-Man, however he jumps far removed in the nick of time. Norman is wounded, pierced and killed. As he passes on, Norman asks Peter not to inform Harry concerning the Green Goblin. Spider-Man returns Norman's body to his penthouse loft. Harry sees them and faults Spider-Man for Norman's passing at the memorial service. He promises vengeance and expresses gratitude toward Peter for being a particularly incredible companion. Peter goes to visit Uncle Ben's grave. Mary Jane tracks down him there and admits her adoration for him. She kisses him gently, energetically. Peter needs to come clean with her yet can't. All things considered, he tells her he can never be more than her companion. Mary Jane has a suspicion that she may have kissed him previously, however Peter leaves, knowing the two is approval and is reviled throughout everyday life. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Thanks for watching. If you want to watch the full movie, link in my description.